Today, we're tackling a question that's kind of fundamental. When you sit down with a counselor, have you ever wondered who actually taught them?
When you see a counselor, you trust they're an expert, and you probably assume they were trained by other expert counselors. That makes perfect sense, right? But what if? What if that basic assumption we all make is a little bit off?
So, believe it or not, for the longest time, nobody really had a clear picture of who these educators were. It was this huge blind spot. That is, until a recent nationwide study in Australia decided to find out for the very first time. They set out to build a profile, a real snapshot of who is actually shaping the future of counseling.
All right, so let's get into it. And what they found is, well, it's a bit of an enigma. And look, this wasn't some tiny survey. Researchers dug into the public profiles of 337 educators from every single accredited counseling course in Australia. They scoured university websites, LinkedIn profiles, you name it. Basically anywhere they could find clues about who these people are.
So the first clue in this whole mystery is pretty straightforward. How do these educators actually identify themselves professionally? What do they call themselves? This is a really big deal because it says a lot about where they're coming from. So, what's the answer?
Okay, and here's where things get interesting right away. Get this. Only about a third of them even call themselves counselors. Now, if you're generous and you lump counselors and psychotherapists together, it's still less than half. The next biggest chunk is psychologists. But what's really wild is that a huge 40% they either don't say or they identify with some other profession altogether.
So, okay, that's a pretty mixed bag of job titles. But that really just begs a bigger question, right? Let's peel back the labels and look at the actual qualifications.
It seems obvious, doesn't it? To teach counseling, you should probably have a degree in counseling. It feels like the absolute bare minimum. But, well, the data tells a very different story.
Just 54.9%. Yep, you heard that right. That means that almost half, nearly 50% of the people teaching our future counselors don't actually have a specific degree in counseling themselves. They might come from fields like psychology or social work or even something else entirely.
All right, so having a piece of paper is one thing, but what about actually being registered to practice? That's a huge indicator that you're current, that you're active in your field, that you're meeting professional standards. It's the difference between just knowing the textbook stuff and actually being a professional counselor.
And, well, the number drops even more. Just 39.1% of these educators are on the National Register for Counselors and Psychotherapists. So look at this gap. It's really the key here. We start with barely half, about 55%, having a counseling degree. But when you ask, okay, who is actually registered to practice right now, a huge sign of being engaged in the profession, that number plummets to under 40%. This just perfectly shows the disconnect, right? Between the people doing the teaching and the profession they're supposed to be teaching.
And believe me, this qualification disconnect, it gets even more dramatic when we start looking at who's running the show.
Okay, to really get what's coming next, let's use an analogy. Imagine discovering that in all of Australia's top chef schools, like 80% of the head instructors had never actually worked in a professional kitchen. Crazy, right?
Well, hold on, because that's almost exactly what this study found when it looked at the very top. We're talking about the senior academics, the professors, the people with all the power to shape the programs.
Out of all those senior academics, only 19.4% have a counseling qualification.
Which means a staggering 80.6% do not. Let that sink in. More than 4 out of 5 of the most senior people teaching counseling aren't actually qualified counselors.
The researchers have a name for this. They call it the promotion gap. Basically, if you do have a counseling qualification, you're much more likely to be stuck in a junior role. The top jobs, the leadership positions, are almost all held by people from other fields. It almost seems like to get promoted in academic counseling, it's better not to be a counselor.
So it's like you have to climb someone else's career ladder to get to the top of your own. So what? What does this actually mean in the real world?
Oh, this matters a lot. This isn't just some academic argument. Think about it. First, if your teachers aren't counselors, how are you supposed to develop a strong identity as a counselor? Second, the classes might be taught from the perspective of another profession, like psychology, which has totally different values. And third, it just reinforces this idea that counseling is somehow a lesser profession. Finally, a lot of these programs are now falling out of line with new, much stricter rules that are trying to fix this exact issue.
So is anything being done about this? Yes.
The professional organizations are stepping up. Just look at the new standards coming in 2025 from PACFA, which is one of the big accrediting bodies. Under the new rules, the person in charge of the program has to be a qualified and registered counselor, no more eligible for it. And a majority of the teachers have to be qualified and registered too. It's a clear move to get the profession back in the hands of its own people.
And really, that's what this is all about. It comes down to the identity, the integrity, and honestly, the entire future of counseling as a profession.
So we're left with this really powerful question. When the people teaching a profession aren't really from that profession, things get blurry. And it makes you wonder, if a profession doesn't train its own, then whose profession does it become?